Thank you, David. Now to Uvalde, and a damning report released today by the Department of Justice finds countless failures by law enforcement who responded to the Uvalde school shooting.
The federal review was launched just days after the shooting in May of 2022. The full report features remembrance profiles of the 19 students and 2 teachers killed in the shooting, as you can see here. Attorney General Merrick Garland also met with the victims' families before the report was released.
We have live team coverage in Uvalde analyzing the report and hearing from the victims' families. We start with Cheryl Mercedes. Cheryl, what do they believe happened?
Well, Len, the Justice Department says they believe that the tragedy that happened here at Robb Elementary School was a result of a lack of urgency, leadership, and communication. In fact, the word failure is mentioned 43 times in this 600-page report, and that doesn't count the number of times it was spoken by federal officials at a news conference here today.
That a series of major failures in leadership, in tactics, in communications, in training, and in preparedness were made by law enforcement leaders and others responding to the mass shooting at Robb Elementary.
U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland stood before a crowded room of shooting survivors, relatives of those killed, and reporters as he recounted the missteps the Justice Department found in its review of the Uvalde school shooting. The report noted on average an active shooter incident is over within approximately 12 minutes from first notification. But in Uvalde on May 24, 2022, it took law enforcement 77 minutes, 6 times longer.
It is now widely understood by law enforcement agencies across the country that in active shooter incidents, time is not on the side of law enforcement. Every second counts. And the priority of law enforcement must be to immediately enter the room.
But according to the DOJ report on Robb Elementary, a lack of leadership led to confusion among law enforcement agencies and EMS, with no one taking clear charge, a mistake that AG Garland says resulted in a chaotic scene at the school and at hospitals where relatives were trying to reunite with loved ones.
Surviving victims, some with bullet wounds and other injuries, were put on buses without being brought to the attention of medics. Some families were told that their family members had survived when they had not.
The communication breakdown continued in the days, weeks, and months following the shooting, with families re-traumatized with misinformation and a lack of answers.
The families of the victims and survivors deserved more than incomplete, inaccurate, and conflicting communications about the status of their loved ones. This community deserved more than misinformation from officials during and after the attack.
The report also offers 273 recommendations to law enforcement agencies across the country in hopes of preventing a tragedy like the one that happened here at Robb 19 months ago. Len?
Mercedes, thank you for the update.
Aniela Ruiz is in Uvalde as well. You spoke with many of the family members of the victims who are sharing their thoughts on this report.
Well, these family members tell me they welcome this investigation with open arms, and although they know it's not a criminal or a civil investigation, they hope it's a step in the right direction to hold those accountable who were outside the classroom. Now take a look. You can see some of the family members were very emotional today as they heard the Attorney General discuss his findings at a press conference. These families hearing from the U.S. Attorney General that the response to the mass shooting was a failure. This was something the families say they already knew, but a sense of relief, they say, to hear it from him and to see it on an official government review, because these families find it difficult to run into these officers who stood by and did nothing to get into the classrooms on that terrible day.
You know, for these officers to sit there and just not do anything, you know, and still be out here, you know, on the streets like nothing happened, you know. And my daughter's gone. It was hard.
By the way, the families actually met with the DOJ last night behind closed doors. This was a private meeting where they got a preview of the findings. But again, many of the family members tell me the report is so long, they have not had a chance yet to read it all, but they will go through it here in the coming days. Now, the DOJ did tell me that they did share their report with local and state agencies. Some of the family members, however, tell me that the DOJ plans to meet with a local district attorney. We still have not been able to confirm that. Reporting live in Uvalde, Anayeli Ruiz, KHOU 11 News.
Anayeli, thank you.
As mentioned, a lot of the families want the Uvalde district attorney to release more information about the shooting.
She's locked up this information that these families deserve to have access to evaluate their legal rights.
That is Attorney Joshua Koskoff calling out the Uvalde DA Christina Mitchell. Koskoff represents several of the victims' families. Meanwhile, LULAC, that's the League of United Latin American Citizens, notes most of the victims were Latino and is critical of today's report, saying, quote, LULAC is disappointed federal investigators have failed to address the criminal accountability. Not one person is facing criminal charges yet. How can that be? End quote.
This afternoon, Attorney General Garland spoke with CNN about the Uvalde report, and he says he understands what the victims' families are going through, and that's why this report is so important to hold people accountable.
Of course, you think of a child shot and left in a classroom, a small classroom, with the shooter who's still shooting for more than an hour, when law enforcement could have come in and rescued and conducted a rescue. It's just not a pain that's ever going to go away.
Garland also said there's much more Congress should be doing when it comes to gun laws.
We will continue to follow this ongoing development in Uvalde. To read more on today's DOJ report and hear more of what the victims' families are saying, head to KHOU.com.